This video asks the question, who owns the ground? We will look at data centers in Northeast Ohio and a question nobody is asking. Communities across Northeast Ohio are saying no to data centers. Twinsburg said no. Ravenna said no. Avon said no. Painesville Township said no. Cleveland City Council is considering it right now. People in these towns are pressing pause on something called a data center. And a very powerful business group, the Greater Cleveland Partnership, is very worried about that. They say we're leaving money on the table. They say we're signaling we're not open for business. They say we're letting emotion get in the way of information. I want to sit with that for a minute, because I think the emotion is the information. A data center is a facility, warehouses, essentially, full of servers, full of computing equipment that stores data, runs applications, powers artificial intelligence. If you use a cell phone, you use data centers. That part is true. They are enormous. They use enormous amounts of electricity. They use enormous amounts of water to keep the servers cool. They generate enormous amounts of heat. And they are moving into Northeast Ohio, fast, because we have something the industry wants: cheap land, an aging but substantial power grid, and water from Lake Erie. Over the last week, I've been sitting with a News 5 Cleveland story about this moment. Communities are blocking these facilities. A grassroots campaign is trying to get a constitutional amendment on the November ballot to ban large-scale data centers statewide. The Ohio General Assembly has launched a bipartisan committee to study the issue. And the Greater Cleveland Partnership, which represents more than 12,000 business members in this region, is pushing back hard, urging communities to stop the moratoriums and let the market work. Here is the quote I cannot stop thinking about. Baiju Shah, the president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, said this about the people in these communities who are pressing pause. This, like many topics, has become one where there's a lot of emotion, not always infused with a lot of information. Now, I want to be fair here. Shah is not wrong that there is emotion in this debate. There is. I want to understand where that emotion comes from, because I think it is carrying something that the Greater Cleveland Partnership's framework cannot hold. Northeast Ohio was promised before. Many times, we were promised steel. The steel came, and it was real. And it employed hundreds of thousands of people in this valley and the valley south of us. It also extracted from us. It took the land, the water, the labor, the air. And then, when the economic logic shifted, it left, not gradually, rapidly. The mills closed. The jobs went. The Cuyahoga burned. The slag is still in the soil. The neighborhoods that built themselves around those mills are still, 50 years later, not recovered from what that departure did to them. We were promised manufacturing. We were promised that this region would remain a center of industrial production. We were promised that the Great Lakes region's water, our most significant asset, would anchor a different kind of future. These promises were real. The infrastructure was real. The workforce was real. The departure was also real. And now we are being told that data centers are the future, that we must not let emotion get in the way of information. The communities pressing pause are signaling they are not open for business. When Baiju Shah says the emotion is not infused with information, I think what he means is, the emotion is not infused with his information, the economic projections, the job multiplier numbers, the growth potential, the AI-powered future. But the emotion in these communities is infused with a different kind of information. It is infused with sedimentary time. It is infused with the layered, embodied, inherited knowledge of what it looks like when you give something to an industry that doesn't owe you anything back, and then the industry leaves. That is information. That is the witness speaking. And it deserves to be taken seriously before it is managed. The Greater Cleveland Partnership released a set of guiding principles for data center development. Some of them are genuinely good. They say operators should pay the full cost of the power they use. They say facilities should minimize water use and capture excess heat. They say there should be community benefits, local hiring, job training. They say incentives, if given, should be performance-based with clawback provisions. These are reasonable things. I am not here to say the Greater Cleveland Partnership is acting in bad faith. I think they genuinely believe that smart growth serves this region. But I want to name what the framework cannot see. The GCP framework assumes that the question is, how do we get data centers in here on the best possible terms? The communities pressing pause are asking a different question. Should these facilities be here at all? And if they are here, who do they belong to? Those are not the same question. And the GCP's guiding principles, however sensible, are an answer to the first question that treats the second question as already settled. Here is what the second question is actually about. Data centers are not like steel mills in one crucial way. They are infrastructure for the digital economy, the way roads and water systems are infrastructure for the physical economy. They are not a product. They are the ground on which everything else runs. The data stored in these facilities, the computing power that flows through them, the AI systems they train and operate, these are not luxuries. They are becoming the basic infrastructure of modern life. And right now, in Northeast Ohio, that infrastructure will be privately owned by companies that are not headquartered here, that do not owe this region anything beyond what can be extracted in a favorable regulatory environment. The water is ours. The land is ours. The grid is shared. The tax breaks, currently running at more than $500 million a year statewide, are ours, and the facilities will belong to someone else. What you build now is built from what was built before. You cannot opt out of that. Whatever is constructed on this ground carries the weight and the shape of what came before it. The question is not whether you are building on history. The question is whether you are building something that belongs to the people whose history is already here. Step 1. This is where I want to get specific. What is the minimum, the non-negotiable, the thing that has to be true before anything else can be true? First, the electricity cost stays here. Data centers are enormous consumers of electricity. The grid upgrades required to service them are real and expensive. The GCP's own guiding principles say operators should pay the full cost. That is a floor, not a courtesy. Before any permit is issued, the full cost of grid infrastructure, transmission upgrades, and connections must be bonded, not promised, bonded, by the developer. The grid belongs to this region. The cost of using it does not get socialized while the profit gets privatized. Step 2. Second, water is a public trust. Lake Erie is not a cooling system. It is a shared regional asset. Any data center drawing on regional water infrastructure must pay into a Lake Erie Water Trust, a publicly controlled fund dedicated to watershed restoration, water infrastructure in legacy communities, and long-term water security for this region. Not a donation, a structural payment tied to water consumption that accrues in public hands. Step 3. Third, real-time community monitoring. Noise, heat, light, and traffic impacts must be monitored continuously by an independent body with genuine enforcement authority, not a voluntary compliance framework. Communities that are living next to these facilities are not stakeholders to be managed. They are sovereigns. They have the right to shut a facility down if it is not meeting its obligations. That authority must be real, and it must be exercised in public. Step 4. Local hiring with teeth. The Cleveland Building and Construction Trades Council is right that these facilities generate construction jobs. Those jobs are real, and they matter. But they are not permanent. Operational employment at data centers is minimal. If this region is going to host the infrastructure for an AI-powered economy, there must be a mandatory, audited local hiring and training pipeline for the construction phase, and a community benefits agreement that funds workforce development for the operational economy that will eventually replace the construction jobs. Without the above, we are not negotiating. We are just opening the door. The public option asks, what if Northeast Ohio owned one? I mean this seriously, not as a fantasy, as a policy question, as the thing that the moratoriums, the grassroots campaign, and the anxiety in these communities are pointing toward without having named it yet. Here is the logic. The state of Ohio has spent, by the numbers in this article, more than $40 billion in subsidized private data center investment between 2017 and 2024. In 2024 alone, state and local governments gave away more than $700 million in combined tax breaks for these facilities. $700 million in a single year. That is not investment. That is subsidy. The public is paying, and a private entity is owning. What if Northeast Ohio owned one? I mean this seriously. Not as a fantasy, as a policy question, as the thing that the moratoriums, the grassroots campaign, and the anxiety in these communities are pointing toward without having named it yet. Here is the logic. The state of Ohio has spent, by the numbers in this article, more than $40 billion in subsidized private data center investment between 2017 and 2024. In 2024 alone, state and local governments gave away more than $700 million in combined tax breaks for these facilities. $700 million. In a single year. That is not investment. That is subsidy. The public is paying, and a private entity is owning. Flipping the script would mean creating a regional public data center authority, like a public utility. Funded by tax revenue and a regional bond, it could build and operate a data center that belongs to the region. The revenue stays here, funding upgrades, the water trust, and workforce development. It becomes a permanent, public asset. This public ownership idea is not new. It's the logic behind rural electric cooperatives, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and municipal broadband. A publicly owned data center authority ensures this region is not merely a resource to be extracted from. Northeast Ohio would be an owner, not just a host, in the AI economy. The communities saying no are standing at the crossing point. They are not against growth, but against extraction. They are asking if a future exists that belongs to them. The answer should be yes, and policy architecture must be built to make that yes meaningful. I want to close with a small but important thought. Communities with moratoriums are not missing out on the future. The present moment is not a waiting room. The region is already something valuable. The refusal is the work. It is the community using its only leverage, the pause. That pause is everything. Use it well.